If
You
you
have
want
not
to take
apologized,
on my
sir.
character,
Jezebel
just
spirit,
ask
sir.
anyone that knows me.
Just one of the heated moments from our live debate with the candidates for governor, the first of 3 debates in this race, including 2 this past week. So let's talk about it now with our panel here today. For the Democrats, former state party chair Robin Winston, and for the Republicans, former vice chair of the Indiana Trump campaign Tony Samuel, along with UIndy's Dr. Laura Wilson and Politico's Adam Wren. All right, so Adam, now we've seen 2 debates on back-to-back nights here. What were your big takeaways from these debates, and where does this race stand now?
I think we learned that, Jennifer McCormick has vastly improved over the last few months as a candidate. Capable showing, Mike Braun as well. I think they overall battled to a draw. But we are seeing a dynamic where Rainwater is really sort of teaming up with McCormick and kind of going after Braun. So it was sort of a 2-on-1 dynamic there. In that debate on Thursday. Laura, certainly Jennifer McCormick really went after Senator Braun and his running mate in that first debate we did on Wednesday night.
Yeah, she did. Adam counted 5 Jezebel spirits, and I'm glad he was keeping track because it was several. I think she was effective at getting under his skin a little bit. And let me be clear, Braun maintained his composure, but every minute that he has to talk about Lieutenant Governor candidate Micah Beckwith is a minute he's not talking about policy. And you really heard McCormick emphasize character. I think that's a really smart strategy in a state that leans heavily Republican as a Democratic candidate, if she can talk about other things just beyond the policies and issues, right? That seemed to be really effective for her on the Wednesday evening debate.
He had to go on the defensive about that campaign ad as well. Tony, are you concerned that whether it's the campaign ad or Micah Beckwith's statements that some of these things will continue to put Senator Braun in a place where he has to defend some of the things that his running mate is saying in debates like this?
Not really, because I thought he was very poised. And this is a Democrat strategy. You see it at the national level. You try to focus on the personality, and you're trying to do it now here with Micah Beckwith. I'll get to Micah here in a second, but Senator Braun stayed composed. He stuck to the issues, the kitchen table issues that he wants to: health care, education, bringing inflation down, property taxes. That's what he's going to do for the next 30-some days.
But that's the point. His running mate talking about other things.
And she'll try to distract the voter by doing that. It's not going to work. They don't have the money. They got a little more money from the DGA. It's not going to be enough. He's got to be outspending her 3-to-1. He's going to stick with his positive message. And it's kind of desperate what she's trying to do. But you see it at the national level as well. As far as Micah goes, Micah did not call her that or anything else. He was speaking to a podcast, somebody in Florida, a nonprofit, a religious group, talking about an update on races around the states, and he was giving the update for him. And he referred to the woke issues that a lot of voters care about, and that's where that reference came from, the Bible. That's the way he speaks. He's a pastor. He's different than your typical politician.
It's certainly not how everybody took it. Robin, what's your response to that? What do you make of these first debates?
Well, I hope I have equal time. You talk about the difference between her and Mike Braun. Mike Braun doctored an ad. He had to go back and redo an ad because it was false. The media called him out on it. He had to go back. That's an error, Tony. The other thing is, we're talking about Beckwith. Why do we have to go to name calling? Why can't we talk about common sense, kitchen table issues that Hoosiers want to hear? We got enough name calling in Washington. Now we're getting Washington type politics here in Indiana. We need to stop that and focus on what they did talk about in the debate, which was education, jobs, Indiana's future. And I think that Jennifer McCormick did an outstanding job.
All right, so 2 debates down in the race for governor. We're going to have the first debate, perhaps the only debate in the race for Attorney General, right here on In Focus next weekend. We also saw the vice presidential debate this past week. Adam, what are you hearing from people on the ground in some of the big swing states about the impact that debate might have?
Well, myself and my colleagues all selected, J.D. Vance as the clear winner on Tuesday night. But as independent polls came in, polls of independent voters, it did seem like Walz held more of his own than what the commentariat initially suggested. I don't know that the vice presidential debate is going to move voters one way or the other in the grand scheme of things. I think they're going to vote for the top of the ticket. But certainly, Vance did everything that was expected of him in that debate. And there's some internal frustration, as my colleagues at Politico reported, that Walz missed kind of an opportunity. And of course, he was prepped by Pete Buttigieg for that, who was also dealing with hurricane relief and a port strike, which he was able to effectively beat down. But yeah, missed opportunity, I think you can say.
There was also some observations after that vice presidential debate, just generally, that the two of them were fairly cordial at times with each other, which you don't always see in politics. Tony, what did you make of J.D. Vance's night on the debate stage?
Well, since J.D. Vance got the nomination for VP, he's been criticized, and a lot of that it came because people didn't really know him, didn't watch the Republican National Convention maybe. So this was a chance for him to articulate his message and the Trump message, and he did really well. Like Adam said, he won the debate. That was the clear from all of the pundits, and but he proved to the voter that here's a smart guy. He's a heartbeat away from the presidency, and he could take over if he needed to, but carry on the Trump policies, the America First policies, in a very articulate way.
Robin, I know you've got a different view. What were some of your big takeaways?
Well, let's hope we don't carry on the Trump policies that result in January the 6th and people trying to destabilize our democracy. Tim Walz showed what he's made of, and that is pure Midwestern American values. He related to people. He talked about issues that matter in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all those battleground states that are ahead of us. I think that he also showed very nice decorum. It was nice for both of them not to go after each other and be crazy and over the top. So all in all, I think it was a great debate. I don't know that it moves the numbers that much. We still got weeks to go.
Laura, a couple of questions in that debate dealt with some really consequential events this week, the hurricane damage and also the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Sometimes events of that nature can come out of nowhere in an election year and make an impact in some unexpected ways. Economic issues too, like the dock workers strike that Adam mentioned that got settled this week, at least for now.
And I think what's interesting about that with the impact of current events is that's where candidates and campaigns just have to be really well versed in everything. You have to have a policy and a strategy for something that you may not expect, but of course that's going to happen, and it can happen as a candidate. It can happen if you're elected in those positions in office. I thought it was great to see them incorporated in debates because you won't see it in a 30 or 60-second soundbite in an ad because they may not have expected that to, right? But you want to see how your elected leaders would handle that if they won the election, and we got to get some of those perspectives in the debates this week.
And Adam, another big moment from that debate came towards the end when J.D. Vance had to reference the question about whether or not President Trump lost the election in 2020. A question we also took to Senator Braun on the debate stage this week in the race for governor.
That's right, and we saw Braun disagree with J.D. Vance, saying that Trump did lose in 2020, and I think in the end, and history will remember Vance saying Trump, not saying that Trump won that election.
Jim Banks, we took that question to him as well. You'll see that in a couple of weeks. His response to that kind of siding more with what J.D. Vance had to say on that question. All right, coming up next, President Biden surveying the storm damage from Hurricane Helene as an Indiana lawmaker makes a trip of his own to help the victims of that storm. We'll be right back after this.